Hello and welcome everyone to today's Association for Manufacturing Excellence webinar titled Lean Certification Overview. I'm Jerry Strohmeyer, the Education Training Program Coordinator for AME, and I will be your moderator. Today's presenter is Larry Anderson, President of Resource Thinking. Larry is Lean Gold certified by AME, Shingo Institute, and SME. He is a Lean Senior Management and Training Professional with over 40 years of experience. He serves as a Senior Examiner and Team Lead for both the AME Excellence Award and the Shingo Prize for Operational Excellence. He is certified by the Shingo Institute to facilitate all Institute workshops and is the past chair of the AME, Shingo Institute, and SME Lean Certification Oversight and Appeals Committee. He holds a BSME degree in Mechanical Engineering from Texas Tech University. Larry is the AME Southwest Board President, a member of the AME Board, an AME Excellence Award Assessor, and is on the AME Award Council. Before we start, just a couple of housekeeping items. You will be in listen-only mode throughout the webinar. You will see that you are muted on your attendee panel on the right side of your screen. If you have questions during the webinar, please type them into your question area in the attendee panel and click on Submit. We'll review the questions at the end of today's presentation and answer as many as we can. When you log off today, please check your email inbox, and it will be an invitation and link to fill out a short webinar attendee survey. Please take a few minutes to complete the survey today, as your feedback is very important to us to improve future webinars. Larry has also graciously agreed to provide a PDF of today's presentation. We'll be sending that along with a recorded link for a webinar replay to each of you next week. Now I am pleased to introduce Larry Anderson, who will present Lean Certification Overview. Take it away, Larry.
Thank you, Jerry. I sure appreciate it. Thank you for everybody who has joined the webinar. We're going to be talking a little bit about Lean certification today. I will say we had a little bit of glitch at my end on the computer, so Jerry will be handling the slides today from AME headquarters. So I appreciate if you'll allow me to just say next when we need to go to the next slide. So if we could, Jerry, next slide, please.
Okay.
I'd like to take a quick poll. We have 3 levels of certification, and bronze, silver, and gold. And we'd like to take a quick poll, if we could, to see which of the levels you would be interested in.
Okay, the poll is now open, so if you can vote, we'd appreciate it. Okay, great. I think we have everyone in, and now we'll close the poll. And the results are 38% bronze, 50% silver, and 13% gold.
Okay. Thank you for that. Because the different levels of the certification, there are currently different mechanisms for documenting your work experience. So what I'd like to do is go through a little bit of background about the certification overall, and then we can get into some details about bronze, since a third of you or about 40% are interested in that, and then talk a little bit about silver certification. So if we could go to the next slide. So the Lean certification provides 2 things for practitioners. One is a certificate of knowledge. Each of the levels requires an exam, completion of an exam, more details about that in a few minutes, which certifies knowledge at the different levels of certification. And then finally, there's the certification, which requires documentation of experience and application of knowledge. The certification is sponsored, as Jerry mentioned, by Association for Manufacturing Excellence, Society of Manufacturing Engineers, and the Shingo Institute. It was developed and is currently administered by Lean practitioners, volunteers, basically. And as I mentioned, we have 3 levels: bronze, silver, and gold. So we'll go into some detail about each of those. Next slide, please. The certification is currently structured around the Shingo Prize for Operational Excellence. The body of knowledge follows the Shingo Prize structure. and the documentation in terms of requirements for documenting your work experience and so on are consistent with the Shingo model. It is housed at the Society of Manufacturing Engineering. Now that means that they administer the exams that are required, basically keep all the records of certification, keep records of documentation of work experience and so on. We are administered, however, by an Oversight and Appeals Committee, which I am a member of and past chair of. It is a volunteer committee. There are 3 members from each of the sponsoring bodies that are on the committee. They maintain the exam integrity, develop experience documentation requirements. In the case of bronze, it's portfolio. In the case of silver and gold, it's an accomplishment record. They maintain the body of knowledge, the competency and behavior model, the suggested reading lists, and the bronze exam review course, which is available to anyone who wants to prep for the bronze exam. Next slide, please. I took a screenshot of the SME website, so you can see the link, sme.org lead certification, which is kind of a matrix of the certification levels. A little bit difficult to read, but it will be on the PDF that we send out, so you'll be able to copy the link. In the SME website, you can find all of the documentation necessary to prepare for the exam, apply for the exam, apply for certification, and basically the documentation that's necessary to fill out, to submit your work experience. And earlier we had mentioned the body of knowledge and the competency and behavior models. Those are all documents that are available on the SME website, linked to the links on the screen right at the moment. Next slide, please. At the bronze level, the practitioner is participating in Kaizen events predominantly. The bronze level requires 80 hours of education and training. The exam for that level is $499. It is open book, does require 3 hours or is allowed 3 hours. It's multiple choice and has nominally 165 questions. As I mentioned a minute ago, the Oversight and Appeals Committee maintains the integrity of each of the exams at the 3 levels. So any particular exam that you might take may have a few more questions. Those are there so that they can be validated as being acceptable questions for differentiation of knowledge. So 165 is kind of the nominal number of questions. In addition to the exam, there is a portfolio. Every portfolio is reviewed, peer reviewed by an individual who is certified at the level of practitioner. At the bronze level, there are 3 projects that are required, and they need to be documented in the PDCA format. We do have more information of that in subsequent slides. There is a section for reflection where we ask individuals to reflect on their lean journey and specifically knowledge that may have been gained or insight that may have been gained through going through the certification process. Each of the levels, you'll see this for each level, requires recertification every 3 years once you are certified. Basically, recertification is there to maintain practitioners and to ensure that they are continuing to practice in the certified areas. It basically is an experiential kind of thing. You do not have to rewrite portfolios or rewrite accomplishment records. Basically, there's documentation on the AME website where you can indicate that you're continuing to attend workshops, attend learning experiences, and applying the knowledge that exists at the bronze level in the context of Kaizen events. Next slide, please. Statement from the body of knowledge and from the Lean Certification homepage at the SME website. Practitioners at the Kaizen level of contribution successfully applying tactical implementation within a work cell, a work group, or a value stream to drive improvements and show measurable results. At the bronze level, it's somewhat the entry level of the certification. From a career progression standpoint, you might think of the certifications as bronze being entry-level initial jobs in a lean environment, in a continuous improvement environment. Silver is with some growth, so you're looking at a broader perspective of value streams. And then gold is generally associated with business transformations, complete plant sites or businesses. So at the bronze level, you'll be concentrating on basically projects, which is why the portfolio is a plan, do, check, act. It's a project-oriented documentation process, where at the silver and the gold level, it's more of an overall experiential documentation. Next slide, please. Haven't seen it change it. Okay, there we go. Thank you. So at the bronze level, what we are asking for documentation that will be peer reviewed is a series of questions, basically. And so I'm going to go through what those questions are so you can be considering them in terms of looking at projects that you may be working on or may be involved in. We suggest to folks who are in the lean world generally have numerous projects that they're working on. So we suggest that people select 3 that would say be the best example of their application of Plan, Do, Check, Act. And so the general context of the information I'm going to convey here in a second is that. So in the planning section, we ask, how were you involved in the project selection and definition? There's words behind that, obviously, but down at the bottom it says, for example, you might explain the scope of the project, how it fit into the bigger picture for your organization, and so on. It's appropriate to say at this point, and to reinforce as we go through the portfolio, we are really looking for an individual's contribution to projects. We understand that most projects, particularly Kaizen events, are done in a team environment, but the portfolio is really about you as an individual in terms of your contribution, in this case, looking at how the project was selected, how it was defined. Next slide, please. So in the plan phase, we'd like for you to describe your involvement in the selection. Why was the project selected? What were the impact on the entire organization? And did the project link specifically to customer quality, cost, and delivery characteristics? Always trying to focus on the outcomes that are associated with the project. Next slide, please. Next question, still in the planning phase of the project. How did you participate in the documentation of the current condition and the target condition? Explain what was done to document the current and future states. But make sure you elaborate on what you did. So again, we're trying to focus on you as an individual. It is your application and your certification. But this is an area that is really pretty important to the portfolio process. A point of maybe reference and things to watch out for. Quite often we get portfolios that establishing the current condition and particularly the target condition at the start of the project is an area for improvement on portfolios. So we would encourage you to think about this question in terms of participation, certainly, but maybe as importantly, actual documentation of the current condition and the target condition of the project, whether it be a Kaizen event or an individual project that you led or participated in. Next slide, please. Continue with plan. What is the current condition, specific and measurable, and how did you document it? And also for the target condition, again, to reinforce what was the target condition, specific and measurable, and how did you document it? So again, in portfolios, just as a caution point, so to speak, be sure that the projects that you're working on, that you understand the current thing, that it is measurable, and that your target condition will be looking for changes in the metrics that you've chosen to try to influence with the project. Next slide. Continue with plan. What metrics did you use in the project? Okay. How did you measure the causes of the problem, and why were they relevant to achieve the target condition? We're looking for facts and figures to support your reasoning. Company confidential data can be used in an indexed or normalized data format. Generally, there's not an issue in terms of writing portfolios if the company or if your organization says we don't necessarily want to convey specific improvements results. But you can index them, say, relative to the current condition, the target condition was a percentage improvement or something like that. So we're not asking for confidential information. We would like for you in your portfolio, though, to give an indication of the magnitude of the change associated with the effort. Next slide. Planning methods is another area where there's a little bit of caution would be appropriate. What planning methods did you use? How did the team develop plans to attack the problem? For instance, were there charter documents? Were there value stream maps? Were there process maps? And also in terms of managing the project, were there activity network diagrams, Gantt charts, stoplight charts, just a few examples to give you an indication of the kinds of things that the reviewers will be looking for when they look at your portfolio. So again, another important point, a bit of caution. Quite often we see in portfolios in this area where there's general terminology about planning methods, but not specific terminology. May be appropriate to say at this point, for both documents, whether it's at the bronze level or at the silver or gold level, the portfolio or the accomplishment record, if an application leaves the peer reviewer with questions, they have an option to ask for additional information of the applicant. Quite often we find ourselves asking for additional information when we're looking at these planning methods area of the portfolio. Next, please. Still looking at you as an individual, the applicant, describe your contribution to the project. What were your roles and your responsibilities during the project? So you could be leading the project, you could be participating, you could be gathering documentation, you could be doing some training. There are numerous things that you as an individual will probably be doing on a project, whether it's a Kaizen event or maybe a longer term project that you've been working on. So again, don't consider this to be having to convey team results or things like that. In the case of the portfolio, it's okay and actually expected that you will say, here's what I did relative to helping the team or the organization achieve results that they were looking for. Next, please. Again, continuing with the portfolio flow of Plan, Do, Check, Act. First element in the Do section is describe proposed countermeasure solutions with implementation. Okay, what was changed? What changes were you specifically involved in? and how did you contribute to identifying and making them happen? List specific countermeasures and solutions that move you toward the target condition. So what we're looking for, again, is we looked at the current state, we looked at the future state, what specific elements of lean, to put it in that context, did you apply to move from the current state to towards the target state? Again, another area where sometimes we see on portfolios general statements about countermeasures. We're looking for as specific as you're able to provide, and where you were specifically involved and how you were specifically involved. Next, please. Describe the actions taken, identify how you identify and make the changes. So just to reinforce again, some components of Plan, Do, Check, Act that are expectations for the portfolio. Next, please. Continuing, describe the lean principles and tools, methods you used in the project. To go down to the next bullet point, what lean principles, lean thinking, Shingo price concepts and principles were used in this project, and what lean tools were used in the project. The context of the Shingo model is principles, systems, and tools. In this area, again, point of caution, when we look at the lean principles, we're looking for the thought process that's associated with why we did what we did. Tools are the specific things. You may have done some 5S, for instance. We're looking for some conveying of why we did 5S. So please look at this section in the context of what principles were we aspiring to, what systems did we apply them to, and what tools, methods did we specifically use. It would be appropriate to look at, if you have not looked at the Shingo model, which is available on the Shingo Prize, shingo.org website, to get some concept if you haven't had a chance to look at the structure of principles, systems, and tools. Next slide. Now we're in the check phase. So we spent quite a lot of time in the planning phase. We made some changes or documented some changes that we made. Now we're looking at how did your results compare to your target condition. Again, in terms of points of caution, if we have a portfolio where the target condition is not clearly identified, feedback might come in that section of the portfolio, but may also come in this section where we're doing the checking. If we don't establish a target condition at the start of the project, there's really nothing for us to compare when we get to the check. What happened to the measures you explained in plan number 3 above? Note, it is not necessary that the project be successful to be used in your portfolio, but you should still explain how the results compare to your expectations. Okay. To continue, definition of check. Was the expected target achieved? If so, what was the benefit? If not, why not? So again, we're trying to reinforce for all of our practitioners the application of Plan, Do, Check, Act. So again, if we've identified the current condition, identified a target condition, when we get to the check section of the portfolio, we can basically identify to what degree did we reach the target condition, and then have an opportunity to explain or to indicate why there may have been a miss in the project. Next slide. We're asking specifically for your role. What was your role in the check process? What did you do to monitor the changes? If you found an exception, what did you do to correct it? So please, again, this portfolio is about you as an individual, your contribution to the project. And in the check role, we're saying, again, what was the target? How close did you get to the target? If you were not achieving a target, what kinds of things can you identify that may have caused that? and then please give us an indication in the portfolio of what your specific role was. Next, please. Check. We do ask that you consider what the level and trend of the improvement is. Again, trying to look at continuous improvement and basically not have one-off projects that may get some short-term results. So, do the changes meet, exceed, or fall short of your expectations? Are the improvements holding, improving, or sliding back to old ways? With some requests for some explanation. So we're really trying to have applicants indicate that we did a project, we knew where we were, we knew where we wanted to be, we have achieved whatever level of target condition that we were able to do, and that we've basically instituted systems, tools to allow continuous improvement to move forward and not to slip back into old performance levels. Next slide, please. And then finally, in the ACT section, it's predominantly, since we're looking at an individual applicant here, it's in the lessons learned context. What have you personally done to sustain this project? How long were you involved in ensuring that the new process became a new way of operating, and so on? And then looking at the overall project, if we can go to the next slide. So that you can be thinking about what the next improvement steps might be. So again, we want to institute continuation of the gains that were achieved through the project, and then be looking at what next continuous improvements activities might be appropriate, and then to ask you to consider through the project what things you may have learned. Quite often people document that they learned that certain techniques in their organization work better than others. In general, people indicate that working with associates is a very good thing to do. We're actually looking for those kinds of things from an experiential standpoint. Next slide. And then finally, in the bronze, we have a reflection section. Okay, and it specifically asks for what lessons learned through completing the Lean certification process. Whatever training you may have had included, what your experience was, what you may have learned from the knowledge exam and from the portfolio. How have you improved your knowledge and skills as a result of pursuing Lean certification? So this is more of a specific request from a portfolio standpoint, directed at the process of achieving bronze certification. Certainly there's a general context for what we've learned, but in this case, quite often folks document for us that they, because they went through the process, they learned things about Lean, first of all, but secondarily about the processes and the knowledge that they have about Lean and how to make projects successful. Next slide. We asked for next greatest challenges. What has been the greatest challenge in your Lean journey, and how did you address it? And there are always struggles and challenges in learning and implementing Lean. Describe one major challenge and how you overcame it. So we're, again, looking for your particular experiences. I guess just a point of caution here. Sometimes we see organizational references in terms of the reflection, greatest challenge. What we're really, again, looking for is an individual thought process. What challenges did you personally have? It could be knowledge challenges. It could be application of knowledge challenges. And what kinds of things have you done or are you trying to do to overcome those particular challenges? So in this area, please continue to make it personal in terms of you as an individual, because, again, it is your portfolio. And we understand as Lean practitioners that organizations are challenges and people within organizations are challenges. But each of us over our career has to develop methodologies to help overcome those challenges. And that's what we're looking for, certainly at the bronze level. Next slide. What have you learned in your lean journey, and how will you change your approach and application? Please give specific examples and describe the problem in your approach and how did you fix it. Again, in the reflection context, from this is again a more broad perspective than the earlier question about lessons learned. This is more broadly on your lean journey, which certification is a part of, as are projects that you may work on and additional education that you may choose to go after, and or webinars, conferences like the AME conference, and so on and so forth. So again, trying to give each of the individuals that pursues bronze certification an opportunity to think about where do they go next, not only organizationally, but from a personal standpoint, from a personal lean knowledge and application perspective. Next, please. Please give us some indication about your three-year continuous improvement plan, so that we can get some indication of how you're thinking about moving forward on your lean journey. Again, the general context of certification is somewhat associated with a career progression. Bronze would be, if you're starting on your journey, lean journey, and your organizational journey. Silver is a certification that would be associated with maybe being with an organization for a while or practicing for a while, and then certainly gold, similar, maybe a longer tenure in terms of practicing. So thinking about your three-year plan would be appropriate at all times in your lean journey. Next, please. And finally, trying to wrap up in terms of your reflection, what do you think the greatest challenges would be if you have a three-year plan? And what might stop you from achieving your self-improvement objectives? So again, trying to give the applicants at the bronze level an opportunity to think through, first of all, what would I like to do? What might my target condition be in 3 years? And then what kinds of hurdles might I have to try to achieve that? Next slide, please. Maybe a quick overview, but again, you can go to the SME website. The information I just conveyed is basically extracts from the documentation for portfolio for the bronze level certification. So all of the words, if you download, if you're pursuing bronze, which is, I guess, 38% were, then if you download the documentation, the competency behavior model, the body of knowledge, certainly the Word documents that are associated with submitting a portfolio, the wording will be very similar, maybe exactly like what's presented in the slides. Again, just trying to give some conveyance of information in particular areas where there may be some challenges for folks that have submitted portfolios in the past. Since 50% of you, I think, were interested in the silver, we have some information about that. Probably we'll spend some time on that. Have a couple of bits of information on gold, but it seems like we have a little bit less interest in that at this point in time. At the silver level, the practitioner is basically looking at value streams. A value stream can be, and we do have a definition on the SME website of a value stream, but basically it has suppliers, it has customers. In the context of bronze, it may be a Kaizen event in a work cell. The context of silver is a value stream that would have multiple work cells in it or multiple work activities. The education requirements for silver are basically an additional 80 hours of education. There's for a total of 160. Again, the perspective historically has been bronze and then silver and then gold. So the educational requirements build on themselves through each certification. You'll see that in a couple of minutes when we look at the gold certification also. 160 hours of education required. Education could be courses you take, could be participation in site visits, could be participation in conferences. There's numerous ways to get education and training hours. Those are all, again, documented on the SME website with specific examples. You can get education credit for reading books. Generally on book reading, we give a certain number of education training hours per book, just to try to have some standardization. So really at any level of certification, it would be valuable to go look at what the education and training metrics looks like. There is an exam, $599 is the cost. Open book again, 3-hour exam, multiple choice. Nominally 150 questions. As I said a minute ago, there may be some others on any given exam so that we can validate questions for future exams. At the silver level, we require an accomplishment record. I guess in the last 2 years, the Oversight and Appeals Committee determined that continuing a project-related portfolio for silver and gold was probably not reflective of what people were actually doing at that level. So we changed the requirement to this document called an accomplishment record, which I'll give you some details of in just a second. Accomplishment record at the silver level includes a specific requirement to coach and mentor others. And so if you're interested in silver, it would be good to think about where you have relationships where you're bringing someone along in terms of their lean journey, because the accomplishment record will require some documentation of those kinds of activities. At the silver level, every accomplishment record is reviewed by 2 certified individuals. So if you choose to pursue silver certification, pass the exam, submit an accomplishment record, there will be 2 silver or gold certified individuals who will take a look at the accomplishment record and provide you feedback. And again, recertification is required every 3 years. Basically, it's just demonstrating that you're active in terms of continuing to learn, attending workshops, attending seminars, continuing to take classes. You can indicate that you're still working in the lean environment. Those are valid indications of continuing in the lean world for recertification purposes. So let's go to the next slide, Jerry. Thank you. So at the value stream level, things that might be consistent or would be consistent is leading teams, successfully applying lean thinking processes and techniques to value streams, more than a single work cell, for instance, nurturing lean behaviors in others. That's consistent with the need to document mentoring, coaching kinds of activities. In general, the silver level would probably be indicating of 2 or more years of professional experience. And maybe more would be actually more of a truism relative to silver. And if you think about the progression from bronze to silver, probably a couple years or more at the bronze level, potentially had an opportunity to move into a higher position or a broader position in terms of scope, which would allow an individual to move into more of a value stream perspective than an individual Kaizen event perspective. So 2 or more years professional experience generally associated with the silver level. Next slide. So the word that we use is integrative lean, and definition continues in that first bullet point. Integration of lean activities coupled with organizational restructuring necessary for transformation and sustainable lean operation of a complete value stream. So in general, at silver level, we are looking for documentation by an individual that they basically have looked at lean from a value stream perspective, that their integration of activities maybe across work cells or across departments or something like that. The context of organizational restructuring is to basically look at the flow of value, potentially align the organization structure to the flow of value to the customers, and to do that basically in the context of a value stream. And very specifically, the final bullet point, value streams for the context of all of the certification. Any process that has a defined customer and supplier can be internal, does have material flow, does have information flow, generally the context of a value stream map. Processes should include multiple operations or tasks that require the use of several people, machines, or equipment. So again, the context of a value stream is more than one work cell, maybe more than one department, so on and so forth. So it's generally a broader perspective of application of lean from, let's say, a specific project or a cell, or maybe traditional Kaizen events in terms of their focus. That's not to say that a Kaizen event would not fit in an accomplishment record. If it's looking at a broader value stream perspective as opposed to, let's say, improvements in an individual cell. Next slide, please. And small words, but I'd like to go through each of them because they are important in terms of creating an effective accomplishment record for your application. For each accomplishment, please provide the following. The dates that the activities were conducted, start and end dates, the background, a general statement of the situation or circumstances surrounding what you accomplished or achieved. In some contexts, it's kind of like the current state's target condition kind of discussion. Precise description. Precise description of exactly what you did, the activities you performed, the duties, the responsibilities, so on and so forth. So again, the accomplishment record is about the individual applicant for certification. We recognize that teams are generally the way things are done in organizations now, but it's an individual certification. So what did you do? And then finally, the outcomes in terms of the current condition and the target condition. Outcomes, results, long-term impact of your accomplishment or accomplishments. Outcomes may be indirect, but it's important to describe such outcomes. Include the grade you received if your accomplishment was in an educational training setting. Right? So if you basically are looking at a documentation of your accomplishment record of completing coursework or something like that, then your outcome presumably is a good grade. And again, going back and looking about the long-term impact of your accomplishments would be appropriate in the accomplishment record. So for all accomplishment records, we ask for that kind of documentation. There is a form, again, that can be downloaded from the SME website that puts a structure around these questions that we're asking or the documentation that we're looking for. Next slide, please. You'll see TL01, TL03 over there. Basically, those are terminal learning outcomes. It's a structure that was developed by the Oversight and Appeals Committee to focus on certain elements of lean transformation. They are people transformation, process transformation, leading or orchestrating the applications of tools, maintaining a perspective of the value stream, and measuring what matters. So within the accomplishment record, you'll see a structure. TL01 is basically by itself. It says, okay, what kinds of things did you accomplish? How did you go about accomplishing them relative to helping people transform? Same thing with processes. How did we help processes transform? Did you specifically help or assist in the application of lean tools? And I'll use 5S as an example. There may have been some training that was done, the application. As an individual, you may have gone work with teams, because this, again, is value stream and team perspective. You may have been work with teams to help them understand what 5S is, which there's some elements of people, process, and leading application of tools in that kind of conversation. So 5S implementation, in theory, could have elements that would touch all three of those first bullet points. The fourth bullet point, again, is did we look at the entire value stream when we basically implemented 5S, as an example? And what did we measure that would allow us to indicate that we had been successful in our implementation of 5S? So again, it's not specifically in a plan, do, check, act. It's not specifically project driven. So at the silver level, it's more of a body of knowledge driven. So you could have multiple projects that you are basically incorporating into your accomplishment record and giving some description of how all of those worked without necessarily having to go through and document each of the projects. Next slide, please. At the goal level, again, to just continue, it's a similar thought process. At the goal level, we're looking at organizational transformation. So again, at silver, we're looking at value streams within an organization. At the goal level, we might be characterizing it as multiple value streams within the organization. There are 240 hours of education training required. Similar context for an exam. It's open book, 3-hour, multiple choice, normally 150 questions. Again, from an accomplishment record, there's an element of documentation of coaching and mentoring. At the gold level, if you pursue the gold level, there are 3 certified gold individuals who will review your portfolio or your accomplishment record in the gold context, and will provide feedback, maybe ask some additional questions and so on. And at the gold level, there actually is an interview process. To the extent that we can, we try to do them face-to-face at, let's say, an AME conference or something like that, or a Shingo conference. If that's not possible, then we do have a phone conference mechanism that we utilize to give the reviewers an opportunity to have a conversation with the applicant at the goal level. Again, similar context for recertification, demonstrating that we're continuing on our lean journey. Next slide, please. Okay. Gold practitioners' characteristics would be overseeing various improvement teams, driving change that spans multiple value streams, as I said, leading and coaching others in a transformation process, not necessarily specific projects, but in a transformation process. Demonstrate success in driving both lean organizational and human development efforts. And 5 or more years in general would be kind of a guideline to utilize from an experience standpoint. Next slide, please. Exam resources, this is just an extract from the SME website. At each of the levels, there are suggested reading materials. You can see them there, bronze, silver, gold, depending on which one you're interested in. It's appropriate to say at this point that all of the exams for certification are traceable to information that is in the exam resources list there. So at the silver level, for instance, the silver exam basically utilizes those periodicals that are listed there as the base point for exam questions. That's not to say that it's quotes out of the books, but it is traceable to content that's in the books. That's the reason we have the exam resources, because as you look through the list of books, different lean leaders, lean consultants maybe, to put it in that context, or people who write books may have differing opinions about some things within lean. So we have kind of the standard set so that we can maintain the validity of our exams. Next slide, please. We do encourage you to connect with AME, to attend AME workshops and conferences, regional, national, international, or otherwise. I would have to say, since the certification is sponsored by SME, AME, and Shingo, we would say similar things about Shingo. We particularly like AME, so there are resources. I said, at the AME website, if you want to investigate lean further, there are links that will get you to the specific documentation of all the things that we've discussed today or that I've reviewed with you. And I think we have one more slide. Yes, I would like to thank you. We're in pretty good shape from a time standpoint. We may have a chance for a couple of questions. Do thank you for attending. Hopefully it's been beneficial for you. At this point in history, individuals can challenge, I'll put it in that context, for certification at any of the levels. At the time that I achieved my certifications, there was a requirement that you get bronze certified before you can be silver certified, before you can be gold certified. So in my particular case, I have certifications at all three levels. You see my email there. Would be happy to respond to questions that you may have, because we have a pretty good understanding of each of the levels and the requirements, and would be more than happy to help out anybody that might have questions. The first thing I would suggest is to go to the SME website and look at the body of knowledge, competency and behaviors, and some of the other documentation. And certainly for any of the levels, if you're interested in planning on pursuing them, go ahead and download the documentation, whether it's a portfolio or an accomplishment record form, so that you can start capturing information as you work through projects or transformations. Much easier to capture as you're going through the projects than it is to go back later and try to recover information about what actually happened. So Jerry, if I don't know how we do questions, if there are any, we've got a couple of minutes in case anybody's got anything that they would like to bring up.
Okay, great. Thank you, Larry. Now we will review any questions. And if you do have any questions, please submit them on the right side of your screen. And I know, Larry, you already mentioned this, but the first question I think is worth repeating. But the question is, can you get silver certified without being bronze certified?
At this point, the answer is yes. You have to have, I think, the 160 hours, pass the exam, submit the accomplishment record. I guess just quite honestly, think about the experience and whether your ability to document is focused or can focus on a value stream perspective. That's probably the biggest challenge for people that are challenging for silver. But the answer is yes. You can apply for silver without being bronze and apply for gold without being bronze or silver.
Okay, great. And the next question is, can you begin building your portfolio prior to getting the knowledge certificate?
Yes. This is not time restricted. The guidelines are, once you've taken the exam, you have 3 years to submit your experience documentation, whether it be a portfolio or an accomplishment record. Generally, the context of that was giving people time after they passed exam, but the Oversight and Appeals Committee allows projects prior to taking the exam to be included.
Great. Next question is there a certification for organization level, not at the practitioner level?
There is not in the the context that we are talking about. Now, I guess if I was suggesting things for organizations in terms of operational excellence, there is the AME Excellence Award, and there is also the Shingo Prize. It's appropriate to mention both of those since this is a AME sponsored webinar, and the individual certification is modeled after the Shingo model. So if you want to pursue organizational excellence, those are both excellent frameworks. And in the case of AME, we do have an app that will allow you to do some self-assessment and reflection. So AME has done its best to provide opportunities for organizational excellence challenge in addition to individual.
Great. Next question is, how do I decide which level of certification fits my experience?
I think the main thing that I would say is the breadth of application of your knowledge. So very specifically, at the bronze level, we're looking at work cells. We're looking at potentially Kaizen events, which are quite often focused on work cells or an improvement in a work area. So if that's the experience that you've had, then bronze would probably be most appropriate. If organizationally or in terms of your particular work that you're doing, there's a broader perspective where you might have multiple cells, multiple departments, more of a value stream perspective, silver would be more appropriate. And then at the gold level, there's pretty much a need or a necessity to be working in the context of a site, complete site or business transformation or part of a business transformation. So probably a good thing to do would be to have some conversations. There are mentoring groups that are available. You can get to them through the SME website where certified individuals have volunteered to have conversations with people who are interested in becoming certified. That would probably be an excellent resource to tap into just to get some calibration.
Okay, looks like we've got time for one more question. Does the accomplishment record have to be by project?
No, not at this point. We basically determined that at the level of silver and gold, practitioners were maybe not working in the context of projects. If you look at a value stream transformation, there might be multiple projects within a value stream. You might work in each one of the work cells, for instance. And so at the silver and gold level, the Oversight and Appeals Committee determined that it would be better to allow folks to give a broader description, not one that's limited to a Plan, Do, Check, Act project context. That is actually one of the challenges for folks that are working on the silver and gold certification, because it's easy to think in terms of projects, and it's not necessary for the accomplishment record at this point in time.
Okay, great. And thanks everyone for all your questions. And thank you, Larry, for a very informative presentation. There is a Lean Bronze Certification Review and Exam in Auburn, Alabama on November 6th through the 8th. Our next scheduled webinar will be on Thursday, September 21st, titled Lean Accounting Leaders with Gene Cunningham. Please visit AME.org under the AME Events and Training tab for more information on both events and to register. Also look for future events on Lean certification, including developing a Lean Bronze portfolio. Please don't forget to fill out the short survey that will be in your inbox. Thank you everyone for attending and have an awesome day.
Thank you.